Part two of this live post-game recap is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Has James Franklin reached his limit? Is 10-2 the ceiling? We're discussing that, plus going through more of your comments on the second part of this live post-game show.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So we're still going live here. Let's talk about your comments, and then we will welcome on Dylan Callaghan-Croley from Penn State Rivals. Robert agrees. Matt, they were outcoached. Totally. That couldn't be said any better than that, just simply. Philip, again, watch the James Franklin post-game. He had no answers for anything. It was sad. I have yet, since I've been preparing for this and doing this post-game show, I have yet to see his thoughts, but I am very eager to listen back what Coach Franklin had to say, and I will have episodes devoted probably just to that. Corey Smith says, on a positive note, when Chop went out, they didn't fall apart. They stepped up. Today just wasn't the day for the offense. Truly believe that this team that will fix it. This is a team that will fix it and bring it back moving forward. Defense isn't the problem. Manny Diaz is a great head coach of the defense. He's almost too good for this spot, but a better spot has to open up. He's not going to go take Louisiana Tech. He's not even going to go take jobs like Virginia Tech, ACC jobs, because Miami, Florida is an ACC school, but they're an SEC type of program with the backing and the resources and everything they have. If there's not something better than that, he's not taking it. So he might be around in Happy Valley for a little bit. But yes, Denai Dennis Sutton had pressure. Amin Vanover, Zariah Fisher, all those guys are really good and will be key contributors next season with Chop and Adisa gone. So I wasn't worried. Yes, you want Chop Robinson out there, but it wasn't something they couldn't recover from. You do need him back for the Michigan game, though. I hope he's okay. Safety and health is the most important part of this. Hated to see him go down like that. Robert, again, they had to have a second half plan, and they have to have an offensive plan a whole year to get ready for this game, and we got nada. For Penn State, the second half adjustments weren't there. And James Franklin has shown time and time again, as the coaching staff has changed, you've had different coordinators. The second half adjustments aren't being made in these types of games. It's a game of chess. And I thought Penn State played as well as it could. We didn't get a chance to discuss the fumble, and I think that's what I'm going to start off with Dylan Callaghan-Croley. I really wanted Matt's thought on this, but we had more things to discuss, the bigger picture stuff with comparing Penn State to Ohio State. But in the second half, I think it's important to discuss the actual specifics that happened in the game. Kyle thinks Manny will be gone. He will get decent head coaching offers. He turned an average team around in 2020, 2021. Philip says Manny's gone. I'm not buying it. I'm really not. Excuses. I'm holding Penn State accountable. You have to have reasons why they lost. They're not excuses. They're reasons why they lost. What are we supposed to judge them on? Should have changed. So John says it should have changed QB. Would have added another dimension of the offense. It was clear that Drew was ineffective. I do agree that Bo Pribula should have came in, but not taken over for Drew. Maybe done some things to open up the running attack, because the ground game was not working. The ground game was not working, so anything. You homers need to shred James Franklin once and for all. And we're going to assume that's for Frick's sake. We'll keep it like that. A PG show, right? On this. But I have my own thoughts about James Franklin as well. And I'll table them for the moment, because I don't want to keep Dylan Callaghan-Croley waiting any longer. He's been patient in the background, and we welcome him onto the show now. Dylan, great to see you. You did a post-game show over on Penn State Rivals. I appreciate you taking time on this show. We'll go till 6. We're going to take your comments until 6 o'clock. Dylan, I want to be a little more direct with things that we actually focus on. The fumble play, because we didn't get to get into that. The fumble, really, that was a 15-point swing. Penn State not only took 7 away from Ohio State, but you get 7 back, and I know they went for 2, so that's why it's a 15-point swing, right? Yeah. All right, so two touchdowns, 2 scores in that whole instance. The play itself, when you actually watch it back, and Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt basically kind of took the side of the referee. Oh, he's not watching the play. He's watching Marvin Harrison Jr. in the back end of the defense, and Kalen King held him. when you look at it, bang, bang, Kyle McCord is hit. The ball is out before Marvin Harrison Jr.'s jersey is tugged. Would you not agree?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a bit of a ticky-tacky call, but I mean, if you're Penn State at the same time, I think it's one of those things. If you're Kalen King, I should say, it's one of those things you have to be careful. I mean, you're covering the best player on the entire field. The refs know that, and the refs are going to watch for every little thing in these types of games. Now you can say, hey, Penn State didn't get a call later in the game when Keandre Lambert-Smith went up for a 50-50 ball, but at the end of the day, that holding call on King was a huge moment in this game, and that
was the moment in the game.
Yeah, that entire 7-play sequence, starting with the Chop Robinson injury down to the Ohio State touchdown, was basically the decider of the game. I mean, yeah, Penn State got that late touchdown, but at the same time, I don't think they get that late touchdown if Ohio State, if that's not a 2-score game at that point. That was a really tough play for King and one that obviously he's going to want back, and this entire Penn State team's going to want back. But even beyond that, I at the end of the day, I'd just say with this defense, the performance they had today is the defense did all they could to put Penn State in a position to win that game. I don't think anybody could blame the defense. I mean, they kept Ohio State to under 400 yards. They didn't give up a ton of yards until the fourth quarter when they were getting to the exhaustion point. The offense just, I mean, that was one of the worst offensive performances we've seen out of the Penn State team in a long time. And at the end of the day, it is what it is.
And for Penn State, they shouldn't need that kind of play to decide the. Here's the thing, though. This was an important point that was brought up just about the past decade against Ohio State. We have to acknowledge this at this point. I don't want to pretend anymore. Maybe I did. I'll admit that I did some mental gymnastics trying to predict this game. Right? Penn State and Ohio State. Ohio State, even though they lost that 2016 game, it took a miracle. That play today on Saturday, October 21st, 2023, would have been the miracle. And if it had stood, it would have won Penn State. I fully believe that Penn State, because Ohio State would have been shook. And this almost reminds me of the situation. I know Penn State beat Iowa 31-0, and the Hawkeyes would have had to do so much more. But imagine if Caden Saunders lost that fumble on the punt return, the muff, and then Iowa recovers, punches in, and it's 10-7 going into halftime instead of something completely different. So think about that with the Ohio State-Penn State game today. If Penn State gets that miracle play, they probably win this game, because then they can sit on the football and basically just play keep away from the Ohio State offense. And that's what the Buckeyes did. Buckeyes played keep away. They basically said, take your medicine, Penn State, because we're going to run down the clock. When we get into third and not so manageable, we're going to go to Marvin Harrison Jr. And that game plan worked. Beat you on first down, maybe get another yard or two on second down, go to Marvin Harrison Jr. on third down. And that's what worked, because your offense couldn't keep up. And that was pretty sad, because if you take some of those points away, realistically, Penn State's defense reminded me a lot of Iowa today, saving the day. You would have held this Ohio State team hypothetically to 13 points. That touchdown, like you said, came late. Everybody was gassed. But my bottom line for the Nittany Lions, and why they're still little brother here, they're good, great, not elite, is because you need miracles. You need miracle type of plays to beat the Ohio State Buckeyes. And you're just not going to get that unless you have that 1% chance type of luck. And you had it in 2016, but you got to stop thinking you're going to have it in 19, 20, 21, 22, and now 2023.
Yeah, and it's really we on our Penn State Rivals post game, we went on a long time. It was a little bit miscombobulated, but there was just so much to talk about in this game. But I think first, the big difference in this game is Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, Penn State in this wide receiver room, let's just say what it is. This Penn State wide receiver room is not good enough right now. It simply is not good enough. It's good enough to beat 10 of the 12 opponents on Penn State's schedule. It's not good enough to beat Ohio State. And I'll be honest, I was picking Michigan to win that game later this year, no matter what, coming in this week, no matter what. But I mean, I have questions about how much Penn State's going to be able to do offensively against Michigan after watching today. I think they'll have some adjustments. I think they'll come out. I think that'll be a better performance, but I don't know how a lot of people have confidence in this offense after today, and I don't think there is, because I just don't think this wide receiver room is good enough. But the big difference in this game was Marvin Harrison Jr., because Ohio State had a guy on second downs and especially third downs in which they knew he was going to get open. They're lucky that he only had 11 for 162 today. He had opportunities to have 15 catches, 200 plus yards. It was a day to forget for Kalen King against Marvin Harrison Jr. And it is what it is. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a big time player who showed up who has showed up in the biggest moments for Ohio State, including today. But you look at the rest of the Ohio State offense outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. today, just 203 yards total offense,
non-existent.
Not that much different than the non-existent Penn State offense, and that's what I called the Penn State offense in my recap. It was a non-existent offense. There's no way around it. Mike Yursich had a bad day. Drew had a bad day. The wide receivers had a bad day. The running backs actually had a pretty decent day. They did miss a couple opportunities. But, I mean, if you told me at the end of the day that, let's see what was Singleton would have been average 5 yards a carry, I thought Penn State would have been pretty well set up for success. Katron Allen didn't have that success rate that he's had in the past. But Singleton, I thought, had a lot of good momentum today going his way, and then they just kind of didn't go
until Ohio State sold out for the run.
Yeah, which because they don't have to respect Drew keeping that ball on any RPO. Because
let's take a break in this post-game recap and hear from one of our sponsors on today's episode, and that is LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It is easy to post a free job to LinkedIn Jobs. Then all you got to do is add your job in the purple hiring frame to let people know that you are hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy for you to find candidates with just the right skills, just the right experience, so that you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and then hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 at delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
He went off a few times today and picked up a couple yards, but he's not that type of athlete. He's not going to rush for 5-10 yards on those RPOs. It is what it is. This is a very good Penn State team. I still think this is a 10-2 team.
Yep.
I don't think they beat Michigan right now, but I mean, at the same time, I don't blame Penn State fans who right now are, sitting in their seats at home and are frustrated with this type of performance and this type of game. On the PSU 365 podcast, I'm sure you said the same. Coming into this week, this was Penn State's opportunity to go from a great program to an elite program, and they fumbled that opportunity today. Now they have a second chance at that in a couple of weeks, but like I said, I'm not sure I have much faith in this offense. Even if they go out, and I expect them to have good performances against Maryland and Indiana and Maryland, but this Michigan team that they're going to face in a couple of weeks is what I think the best team in the country. So it just, I can get where for some fans are coming from that a 10-2 season would feel like a bit of an empty season, because at the end of the day, the two big games that you had to win, you so far have lost one, and it's not looking good for the second one. And unfortunately, that comes back to what has kind of been, one of the things Penn State could hang their hats on the last few years, which is an explosive offense. And, all the issues that the offense had coming into this week reared its ugly head today, and it's the biggest reason they walked out of Columbus with I would say somewhat of an embarrassing loss, despite it only being, 20-12. That was an embarrassing offensive performance that they're going to have to do soul searching on.
Yeah. Matty Fresh mentioned it. Drew Aller fighting back tears. This game, that was, it wasn't a hedge against my metaphorical bets here that, okay, yes, Penn State wins this game, and thinking that and believing that. I truly did believe that. But I also
Penn State 27-24. I thought they were the better team coming into today.
Yeah. And today they lost, but I look back and I think, you stick these two teams on a neutral field, I can't help but think 10 times, maybe Ohio State wins 6 of them, but they go back and forth, and then you get to that 10th game and where it's basically it's 4-4 or whatever, and then you win a 9-game series, right? And then you do a little math. Math's complicated here. You have a 9-game series, right? And then you're tied 4-4, and Ohio State wins that. That's kind of what I looked at. But football is played. You can't play 7-game series like you can in baseball. You play it. And today Ohio State was better at home, and I think at the end of the day they are still slightly better. But Penn State would get its punches in a hypothetical series. They really would. Brett agrees with us. I want to go back to the comments. Boy, we needed some wide receiver playmakers. If Marvin Harrison Jr. switched sides at the beginning of the game, though, would have been Penn State win. Literally only one good offensive playmaker on those two teams is embarrassing. Mecca Ibuka was out. Travion Henderson was out.
Cade Stover had a nice day for Ohio State as well.
Cade Stover, mossing Kobe King. That was not a fun look.
But I mean, even if they don't have if Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't play in this game, I still probably lean that Ohio State would have won the game just because
that's tough. Without Ibuka and Harrison Jr., that's tough. It would have been.
I get
tough. What you're saying.
It just comes back to the offense for me. It's just like, I don't know what, if any of those would change what the Penn State offense did today, because at the end of the day, the offensive struggles come back to just not having playmakers at wide receiver, and your running backs, which have put up decent stats this year, were once again a bit disappointed. And the offensive line, which has been good all season, probably had their worst performance of the year in the biggest game. It's unfortunate because I thought that defensive effort today was a hell of a defensive effort. Even after Chop Robinson went down, I mean, and I don't think that it shows up in the box score as much as they did, but they're getting pretty good pressure on Kyle McCord for a solid amount today. And Kyle McCord wasn't that much better than Drew. He just ended up having the two best playmakers in this game.
Kyle McCord also benefited from having time. Penn State's offense, it's symmetrical, right? The defense is going to help out the offense. The offense didn't help out the defense. And there's the little things that aren't going to show up today. Special teams matter. When Penn State's defense actually pinned Ohio State deep, of course, they didn't help themselves. They backed themselves up with a couple penalties, and that was very uncharacteristic by either side. I thought they played a clean game in that category. But then the Buckeyes, you're anticipating Penn State's going to get the ball at the 50, punting in their own end zone, and Daquan Hardy lets the punt go over his head, and you're like, okay, now I understand why he wasn't getting those opportunities at punt returner, because yes, he can flash it. He can flash with the speed and agility, but maybe he doesn't quite get, the X's and O's of actually being a punt returner. It's more than just, hey, you got to catch it and run the football. I think people try to simplify it that too much. You cannot let that one go over your head, because that was a 72-yard punt. That was unacceptable when you could. That was a moment to change the game, the tide, the momentum, and Ohio State held on to it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And just a little slightly off topic, just because I was thinking about it. And I know you said before I came on that you didn't get to see many of Franklin's post-game press conference or any of it. No. But there was a moment where he said he thought today we saw two of the best teams in the country on the field. And despite today's performance on offense, I still think that is very much the case. I still think this Penn State team is one of the better teams in all of college football.
Yep.
I still think, again, coming into this week, I thought there was two teams that Penn State didn't match up well against as a whole, and I think it was Michigan and Georgia, defensively at least, and I still think that's probably a little bit of the case. Offensively, I have a little bit more concern now, but I still think you put this team up against all 132 teams in college football. I think Penn State is better than 125, 126 of them. I think you can make an argument for some of the top 10 teams in the country to be better than Penn State, but I still think this is a very good Penn State team. But, I mean, this was just a terrible time for nothing offensively to be working today. And I just keep going back that it's the small things right now for Penn State. It's been the small things for the last few years, and I just don't know. I mean, you can coach and coach and coach as much as you want, but at the end of the day, players have to make plays. Penn State players didn't make the plays today, offensively at least, and that's the difference. I mean, and my only biggest concern going forward with them this year and going into next year is just I think Drew gets better. I think the running back room is going to be great for a very long time. I think the offensive line room is getting better each year. Today obviously wasn't great, but I still think it's getting better. I have some concerns with the wide receiver room going forward. I think 2 years from now, there's a couple guys there who could make a difference. But going into next season, I just don't. I'm just left scratching my head about who could be that guy who takes.
You go to the portal. You can't predict that though with the portal. You just can't.
Exactly. They have to go to the portal this year for a wide receiver again. And you got to hope Dante Cephas takes that big step. Now, hey, somebody could emerge here in the next 3 weeks before 3-4 weeks before.
It's Cephas. I think Cephas, his best football is still ahead of him. He's got another year of eligibility. This was a 2-year plan. Dante Cephas will be the #1 wide receiver in next year's offense. I think the defense might take a step back next season because of all the talent they're going to lose.
I still think it will be a top 15, 20 defense at worst, though. So at that point, I still think Penn State next year, everybody points to this year as being like the year that they had to get to a national championship because of the defense.
I fell for it.
I definitely think that there's a legitimate reason, thought process to that. And I agree that this was probably their quote unquote best shot because of the defense. But at the same time, I think the offense is going to be better next year. But I mean, that's next year. Let's focus on today. But yeah, let's get back to today's game. I know there's a lot of people who are, for lack of a better word, dooming over this loss about what Penn State is, what Penn State could be. And those are all fair concerns to have. I just think the future, there's still a potential bright future for the program. But I mean, at one point or another, you have to get over the hump that is Ohio State. It's a little easier once you get to a 12-team playoff, but I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to be elite, if you're going to win national championships, you have to beat the elite.
Dylan, let's finish with just that because I promised that we were going to go 5 to 6.
Yes.
We're getting towards that 6 o'clock hour here at Eastern time. Comments are rolling in. I am so glad. Hello, Ohio State fans. Thank you for joining the show. I really appreciate it. There are a lot of sore winners for the Buckeye fans that have been in my mentions, that have been in my comments. I'm not speaking for the whole Ohio State fan base, but there are a lot of people that have just been coming after me because they can't just accept the win. Congratulations, you are closer to the college football playoff. Why don't you just accept that and move on? But you have to pile on. You can't just accept that. The topic, Dylan, that I want to finish with is because I brought this up with Matt, saying that Penn State is on an island. They are on an island because they're not good enough to beat Ohio State, Michigan, whatever the top team, Georgia.
Sure.
Alabama's taken a step back, but in years past, they wouldn't have beaten Alabama. But they can beat Washington. Years past, they beaten Washington. They beat up on Memphis. They beat up on Utah. So now they're in this own lane of we can't beat teams in the top 5, but basically anybody outside of the top 5, we bully them. We're going to take one more break and hear from another one of our sponsors, and that is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, the sharks, the pros, all you got to do is pick more than or less than a 2 to 6 player slate of stat projections and watch those winnings roll in. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And with the PrizePicks reboot policy, your entries will stay in play even if one of your players gets hurt. That's right, gets injured for NFL games, college football top 25 games. If you have a player that exits in the first half and doesn't return for the second, that player is then rebooted. PrizePicks is the only and I mean only, daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. Now, what do you got to do? You got to go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for that first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. We are so much better than them, and so it's weird. You're caught between a rock and a hard place here, and you have to accept. I am tired of the mental gymnastics. I've said this quite a bit, but the James Franklin dilemma.
Yeah.
I am not sitting back and advocating that James Franklin, Mike Yurcich, and those people should lose their jobs. I am still going to say that James Franklin is the right coach for Penn State.
Yep.
But it's getting tougher to defend when now the stats are there. I think it's 4-15 against top 5 teams. You had a miracle play to beat Ohio State in 2016. You didn't just beat the Buckeyes. You needed a miracle to beat them. Other than that, you've lost to them every single time. And Ohio State has controlled all of those games except for the one in 2017 and 2018 when you couldn't keep up with second half adjustments and lost those games. Yeah, you've gone back and forth with Michigan, but Michigan has gone to the next level. They went from good to great to elite, and you're stuck in this, well, we're good, we're great, we can beat up on Memphis in whatever bowl game, right? We'll go to the Sugar Bowl, we'll go to the Fiesta Bowl, we'll win on a neutral field at the Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and everybody should be happy. So you have to accept that here. The Big Ten's only going to get harder. Can Penn State fans accept 10-2, and it's probably going to be now 9-3, 8-4, because I am so glad that the Big Ten is expanding, because I'm tired of having conversations around, what's Penn State going to do against Indiana when the game's a 30-point spread and we all know they're going to win. But now you got to go through the gauntlet. You got to play Washington, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, maybe not all necessarily in the same season, but you are now going to go from 2 games you have circled on your schedule to about 6 or 7 legitimate games. Yeah, you're still going to get your Northwesterns, you're still going to get your Indianas, and you're going to get surprise Big Ten teams that are going to make that schedule 8 or 9 games tougher, where you have to circle them in red ink. So Penn State fans, get ready, because the record's not going to be, 10-2 might be a best case scenario moving forward. And I didn't even mention USC and UCLA, but that's James Franklin against top 25 teams, let alone on the road. Michigan and Ohio State. Ryan Day is 36-0 now against teams not named Michigan inside of the Big Ten. I wish Penn State had that problem. They don't. So where do you kind of sit on, does Penn State, is it as good as it's going to get with this? Because I sit back and I say, okay, you fire James Franklin, then what? Do you promote Manny Diaz? Do you go get Matt Rule? What is Matt Rule supposed to do that James Franklin can't? I feel like in this, it is not 1980 anymore. It is not the Joe Paterno era and how things are done. Don't come after me with the scandal and this and that, and he knew. I don't want to hear about that. Let's talk X's and O's and football. Recruiting has changed. You cannot just recruit in Pennsylvania and Maryland anymore and build national championship type of teams. You got to go from sea to shining sea, California, all the way to Florida, to the tip top of Maine to find the best talent, because that's what everybody can do. And I feel like James Franklin is the only coach for Penn State that can do that to this extent. You're not going to get, I'm worried that you're not going to get better than any of this. And you might just, can people accept that?
I'm going to try to keep this not terribly long, because
I went long-winded. Go for it. I'm not going to interrupt. This is all you.
I could talk about this for a while, because I actually just had this conversation with somebody in text. So this is obviously the conversation of the week. This will be the conversation of probably the rest of the season, let's be honest, especially if they end up losing to Michigan. It's only going to get worse. And if they beat Michigan, here's the thing. I think there is a portion of the fan base in which James Franklin, or no matter who the coach, is never going to satisfy, because at that point it just becomes moving the goalpost. It's going to go from, okay, you beat Ohio State and Michigan, great. Now why can't you win the national championship? Okay, it's just going to keep moving the goalpost. So there's a portion of the fan base that he'll never satisfy. Is James Franklin the answer for Penn State? I think out of all the realistic options there are for Penn State, James Franklin is probably their best choice. Yes. I mean, in college football, how many head coaches would you for a regular program, no name program, let's just say it's a good program with, good resources, all that. How many coaches in college football would you actually take over James Franklin? Probably a handful. I mean, there's very few coaches who can recruit to the level of James Franklin. I don't think a lot of Penn State fans understand how hard it is to recruit to Penn State.
Yes.
I love State College area. I think it's a great area, but I also grew up in Pennsylvania. I'm used to Pennsylvania weather, scenery, all that. But here's the other thing about State College. There's no way to get into it if you're an outsider. I mean, it is a terrible place to go if you're coming from outside the state because the airport is small. It's a multiple-hour drive from any major city. It's a very terrible place.
It's a very niche area.
Yes.
And Penn State, they are handicapping themselves as a program, as an institution, by saying we're not going to pay high school players up front. We're not going to give you money to come visit Happy Valley. But Georgia, Texas, hey, let's cut you a 10 grand check to just come see the place. Just visit. That's a big difference.
Yeah, I do think, Penn State sticking to the rules hurt them? Yeah, probably it does. But, I think there's a lot. I don't think that's, and I'm not saying you're saying it, but I don't think that, is a major issue. I think at the end of the day, major issue with recruiting is just that Penn State's a very hard place to recruit to at the end of the day. It's very hard to get kids from the South to want to come to Penn State. People are going to say, oh, what about Ann Arbor and Michigan? What about Columbus and Ohio State? Okay, Columbus and Ohio State and Michigan are two of the biggest brands in all of college football. Yes, Penn State is top 10 brand in college football, but Columbus and Ann Arbor are also very easy to get to.
And Columbus is better than State College.
There's a lot more to do.
In a metropolitan area. Let's be real about this. Columbus is better to be near than State College.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, I don't think a lot of Penn State fans realize and I'm not carrying the water for James Franklin. Wins and losses mean nothing to me. I'm an unbiased reporter at this point. Wins or losses or whatever. And I'm not carrying the water for James Franklin. Outside of regular press conferences, I've never talked to the man. I have no personal relationship with James Franklin. If he's at Penn State, it doesn't affect me at all. But do I think James Franklin is the best coach for Penn State? Yes, because I think he's probably one of few coaches who could actually recruit prospects to Penn State. And B, I don't think he's that far away from getting this program to that next level. But obviously, it's now been 6-7 years of going from great to elite. And, I also think that a lot of Penn State fans don't realize how dysfunctional the athletic department and university as a whole has been for most of James Franklin's tenure. I mean,
he puts up with a lot of BS.
A key part to having any successful football program in the country is having alignment from top to bottom, from the president to the AD to head coach, all the way to the smallest guy on the totem pole in the football program. Penn State didn't have that total alignment until Pat Kraft and Ben Apudi showed up.
They have better alignment. I'm not trying to split hairs, but the board is still kind of split.
Yeah,
when you think about it, and that matters.
And but who is a better option for Penn State that's realistic?
Penn State. Penn State.
Penn State.
Nick Saban would still run into the same issues. Kirby Smart would still run into the same issues. Lincoln Riley would still run into the same issues. So Matt Rule, you have to be realistic with what is going on. So that's when I say I will defend James Franklin as the best option for Penn State because he knows how to recruit Pennsylvania. He knows how to recruit the Mid-Atlantic region. He knows how to get people to even consider, because once upon a time, and the recruiting analysts that I brought on this show have said, well, in the past, Penn State could never recruit Florida. They could never recruit Texas and get even one player to look from the state of California. And James Franklin is the first and only coach who is ever probably going to do that at Penn State.
Yeah. I think the biggest question going forward for James Franklin is just, I mean, every year they lose to Ohio State or Michigan, it seems to be a different issue. I mean, last few years it's been the offensive line. Offensive line wasn't great today, but the year they finally have that quarterback that could be the difference maker, it's now the wide receivers that they don't have to be able to make the plays. Yep. You know, they've had the wide receivers in the past that could be those game changers. Jahan, Parker Washington, even Mitchell Tinsley. Even I think if they have one of those two guys, this Penn State team is wildly different. I think Penn State wins today if they have a Parker Washington or a Mitchell Tinsley. They don't have that guy right now, and it just seems to always be a little bit of a different issue. But it just, I mean, like you said, every coach in America who comes here, like, yeah, if Kirby Smart, you know, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, you could throw maybe one or two guys in there that, yeah, if they're at Penn State, maybe Penn State wins the national championship. But, I mean, at the same time, I don't think it's a guarantee that no matter who coaches this team, that this magically turns into a national championship caliber program. I think they have an opportunity to be a program here going forward that is a college football playoff regular and an expanded college football playoff.
Because they have been. They've been a top 12 team. And
they will make runs every few years. Maybe one of those years they make a run to a national championship. Maybe they win it all. I think in a college football playoff, it's much more a possibility for Penn State in an expanded playoff.
Well, because you're there. You're there. You have the opportunity.
And yes, they still have to be the elite teams. But I just don't think there's any coach outside of James Franklin in the country that probably gets this team to where they are today. No. I mean, there's not many options. People can say firefighting and all they want, but I just don't feel like Matt Rule would have the same success as James Franklin. Because at the end of the day, yeah, X's and O's win games, but you don't have to be a great X's and O's coach to win a national championship. Dabo Swinney has won a national championship. Dabo Swinney is not a great X's and O's football coach.
No, he's not.
He's a great recruiter, and he recruited well. He got two generational quarterbacks, and it worked out for him. You know, and now James Franklin has that generational quarterback. Obviously, you know, this year they have to turn this around fast offensively, and if they beat Michigan, then the narrative changes a bit. But they got next year with Drew, and if Drew can, you know, improve upon what we've seen this year, and they can find a wide receiver that makes a difference, I think next year's Penn State team has just as good of a chance as this year's Penn State team to be that team. I just think possibly next year it could be the offense carrying them, and not the defense. Now, it's going to take improvements from the offense. The other reason I think that James Franklin's still the guy for the job for Penn State is, you know, those first few years he stuck with John Donovan. It took a while for John Donovan to get fired, but since then it seems he's been pretty, you know, forthcoming when it comes to, he knows when he has to make a move. I'm not saying anybody deserves to get fired for this loss.
No,
it's not that.
You can have a bad day, but you picked the wrong day to be a bad day. Like I said, one of the biggest concerns was Penn State had too much to lose. Ohio State did not, and they were at home. If this was a home game at Beaver Stadium, obviously the Nittany Lions' chances would have been better, but Penn State still had too much to lose when this became a conversation of going, again, from good to great to elite.
Yeah.
Ohio State didn't have that in question. There's no questions about Ryan Day. Now, when it comes to Michigan, that's different. They got a lot to lose against Michigan, but Penn State, like today, and that's like the big fish eats the smaller fish. Ohio State eating Penn State. Will Michigan eat Ohio State? That game's in Ann Arbor. I would think that the Wolverines would still beat the Buckeyes this year, but I would decide that on the field.
After this week, I think Michigan is by far the best team in the Big Ten, but
because that Ohio State, even in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Michigan may be the national champion this year. This Ohio State team is a very good team. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like I was overly impressed by their offense today. They ran much of the same stuff that Penn State ran. Like I said, it just came down to the best player on the field, the best player in the country, happened to be wearing the scarlet and gray today and not the blue and white, and that's sometimes the difference. But at the same time, I think, James Franklin maybe has one of the harder jobs in the entire country when you think about it. Because there's no doubt Penn State's a great program. How many 10-win seasons does he have? He's well on his way to another. He probably wins another, New Year's Six Bowl this year as well, in my opinion.
They will.
And yes, it's a little bit empty with a loss to Ohio State, maybe a loss to Michigan. But how many other coaches in the country have, the two of the top 5 programs in the country for the last 3 years in their division? Alabama doesn't have to do that.
Georgia certainly doesn't. Look at the SEC East.
Yeah, exactly. And Georgia's going to, dog walk their way to another SEC championship this year because the SEC East is kind of garbage. And let's be honest, nobody out of the West is going to win that conference. I mean, Alabama's having a down year. Tennessee certainly isn't winning. Who's the best team in the SEC West? The best division in the country is the Big Ten East, and unfortunately for Penn State, the two teams that are also in the conference and division are the two of the top 3 teams in the country. I still think that Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan are 2 of the top 5-6 teams 3 of the top 5-6 teams in the country overall. But I mean, I think James Franklin has one of the hardest jobs in the country, and I think a lot of other coaches in his footsteps in his shoes would not have anywhere close to the same success. Because yes, you can go for a great X's and O's coach, but if you don't have a coach who can recruit to the level of James Franklin, that's not going to matter, because to beat Ohio State and Michigan, you have to have the athletes to do it. And outside of Penn State, nobody in the Big Ten has the athletes to beat Ohio State and Michigan. At the end of the day, this is one of those things where you tip the cap to Ohio State. Ohio State's been the crown jewel of this conference for the better part of 20 years. They remained that. Even I know Michigan's won Big Ten the last 2 years, but Ohio State remains the crown jewel of this conference. Because I think after this year, Michigan probably takes a little bit of a step back. Who knows if Jim Harbaugh is still in Ann Arbor in a year? Yeah. But also, Jim Harbaugh shows that narrative can change very quickly. 2 years ago, Michigan fans wanted no part of Jim Harbaugh. Now they're treating him like he's the best thing since sliced bread. I'm not saying that's going to happen in Penn State, but I mean, narratives change quickly. And I'll tell you what, if Penn State goes out in a couple of weeks, upsets Michigan at home, the narrative is going to change a whole lot quicker in Happy Valley.
Well, unlike 2016, we'll put a lid on it here because we discussed so much. I appreciate most of the comments that we've had. I've been keeping an eye on seeing what people have said, just good, thoughtful, understanding types of comments about college football. But Michigan has done the good to great to elite transition. Penn State has not, because Jim Harbaugh and James Franklin were rowing the same boat. Jim Harbaugh got out and pushed the team ahead. Yeah. James Franklin has not gone over a waterfall, but you're still treading water. And like I said, that's why I said, are Penn State fans comfortable with 10-2, or do you want to go really backwards and take a chance and then be not bottom feeders, but be 5-7, be 6-6, be Michigan State? Look what's happened to Michigan State in all of this, making changes at coaches. I know the different circumstances, right? You would fire James Franklin instead. That's all the hypothetical. There's so much more we could discuss. Penn State, they're a 10-2 team this year. They were a 10-2 team last year. Michigan and Ohio State are still in that next level, and Penn State can't. Even if Penn State is going to need miracle type of plays to beat Michigan, it's not because they're going to out scheme them, they're going to out talent them, they're going to outplay them. You're going to need multiple turnovers, a blocked punt, blocked field goal type of thing to beat this Wolverines team in Beaver Stadium. And that's just the fact of the matter. Dylan, if you got something to add in 60 seconds before we wrap it up here, I appreciate it. Yeah, very quickly.
I think for Penn State fans, I get it. It feels like Groundhog's Day with this program. Probably at this point, it's been the same story.
It has been.
It's been the same story for the better part of 6 years now. I totally get that. At the same time, I think Penn State's kind of in that Goldilocks zone of that. I don't think Penn State's that far away, but also I think Penn State there's also a gap that Penn State has to close. That gap is a little bit bigger than we thought it was coming into this week. I think there's still a lot to be hopeful about surrounding this program. I think the recruiting has taken a step up the last few years. his last few coordinator hires have been tremendous. For Penn State, I mean, yes, it's Groundhog's Day, but I just think there is still reasons for Penn State fans to have hope going forward. It's just you got to hope it's next year now, and like I said, it's Groundhog's Day. I get it, but I'm not.
Well, it's not over. It's not over.
Yeah.
And on any given Saturday, you can beat anybody. Am I taking Michigan today? Am I taking them tomorrow? Am I probably picking them on that Saturday in November? Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
But can anything happen on a given Saturday and Penn State wins, finishes 11-1? Absolutely. Just your chances are a lot less likely.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's still a lot to be hopeful for Penn State fans with this program. But yeah, this is definitely, like I said at the top when I came on, this is a tough loss. This is one where a lot of the guys on the offensive side will need to have a lot of soul searching. But I also think they have a lot of the pieces needed for maybe not this year. But like I said, I think next year, despite not having the same level of defense, this team still has a great chance of being that caliber of team, especially in the expanded college football playoff. Drew was almost in tears after this game. I think that says a lot about what Drew is as a person, as a player. And I would be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the worst performance we see Drew have in his career. And if we see a little bit of a different Drew in the upcoming weeks, maybe not throwing the ball deep a ton, but I think we're going to see a Drew that is on a mission. He feels like that type of quarterback who has that in him. It's just a matter, and if he is the quarterback that we think he is, he will show that, I think, in the upcoming weeks and head into next season. So, I mean, there's still hope for Penn State. It's just, this is a tough one.
And I feel like we didn't even get to it all. I really didn't. We had to look at big picture stuff on this post-game show, and that's important because at the end of the day, you're not going to win big games. You're not going to win national titles if you don't figure out the big picture stuff, aside from the X's and O's. But we're going to talk about that in upcoming episodes on Locked On Nittany Lions. Actually break this game down in 30 minutes or less on upcoming podcasts throughout the week. Preview Indiana because we still have to, even though that's another cupcake game for the Nittany Lions. I want to thank Maddie Fresh, Matt Freiler. I want to thank Dylan Callaghan-Croley for fending off all the Ohio State hate and talking just some Penn State football because we got to figure things out in our own house here. Ohio State fans, glad you have it made. Congratulations. I just wish you would own your win instead of being sore about it. But besides the point, Dylan, thank you so much for doing this post-game show. Can't wait to have you back on for a future episode, maybe another post-game show here soon. And thank you for the time and analysis as always.
Thanks for having me again.
And subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions. Subscribe to Penn State Rivals, HappyValleyInsider.com. That's going to do it for us here on a live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks for checking out this live post-game recap of Penn State versus Ohio State. If you want to watch or listen to the other part of the show, I will have it linked in the description. For more Penn State football and Nittany Lions content, make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Nittany Lions YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts.